I'm Jacob Boudreaux. I'm an alcoholic, and I love all of y'all. I love all of y'all very much, and see me after the meeting. We'll tell some dirty jokes together. If you were at TCPAA last year, I was referenced in the Friday night speaker story about the dirty joke man. So see me after the meeting. I want to thank the host committee for inviting me to come over here and share my experience, strength, and hope with y'all. It's an honor and a privilege anytime that I get to ask to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's been a great experience and very welcomed. And this has been an amazing conference. And I want to give a round of applause to the host committee for the job that they've done. My sobriety date's April the 2nd of 2006. My home group is the Goodwood Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, also known as the Scout Hut. We meet in Baton Rouge, Louisiana on Thursdays at 8 p.m. That's my people. We go out to eat after the meeting. We call it family dinner. It's an open discussion meeting. It's people. It's more than a meeting, and I always say that it's a group. It's a group of people I share my life with that know just about everything that's going on with me, the good, the bad, the ugly. They hold me accountable, and they save my life. That's all I can say. They saved my life. We're active in service as a group, and we participate in area assembly, and we're in it. You know what I'm saying? You know, I was getting emotional whenever they were doing the sobriety countdown, you know, and they said, keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. And I want to tell a story. Whenever I came in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 16 years old. I got sober whenever I was 20 years old. They had this thing called TCPAA going on in Louisiana. And it's an international conference of young people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm from a small town south of New Orleans known as Houma. It's called Houma. There's a TV show. It's nothing like that. Kind of like that, but not really. But in Houma, I was a young person. I was the young person. I didn't think it was possible for young people to get sober, you know. I didn't think they were out there. And I was 18 years old, and I was sitting at the clubhouse at this AA place, and this lady came in and said, there's this event going on about 20 miles away in Morgan City, Louisiana, and it's the subcommittee for TCPAA, and they're having an event. And there was probably about 30 people there, and there was a guy that told this story, and they were chanting, and they were telling him, we love you lots and lots and lots, and cheering and dancing and doing all these things. And I was drunk at that event. I was that guy that was drunk at that event, you know. And even though when I was intoxicated, I still got some. I still picked up the seed. And I ended up getting sober a few years later, and as a result of Hurricane Katrina, we didn't get to host TCPAA that year. They didn't get to host TCPAA that year. And I wouldn't have went to TCPAA because I was still out there and I was still drinking. And I don't know if everything happens for a reason, but if there's anything that good that came from that storm and everything that happened with that, is I went to TCPAA and I was like 3 months sober, and there was like 2,000 people there, young people, you know. And I've been sober ever since, and I've been fired up and I've been passionate and I've been... you get to experience, you know. You know what I'm talking about. You feel it. Joseph, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not sure if you've been here before, but don't keep coming back. Stay. Get a sponsor. Work the 12 steps out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You never have to drink again. It's been my experience, and I promise you that. So I'm here to tell you what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like today. You know, I was in the panel or workshop earlier, and what's it? You know, it doesn't change. I thought for a long time that if I got sober, it would change. Life would change. Life doesn't change once I get sober. I change. The way I react to life changes. The way I view life changes. Life goes on. We go through divorce. I fall in love, I fall out of love, I get hired, I get fired. Great things happen, bad things happen, and I go through all these things sober. And not only do I go through them sober, I don't even think about getting drunk, And that's a miracle if you're anything like me. It's a miracle. So I'll start from the beginning. I grew up 60 miles south in Houma, Louisiana. I'm the youngest of 7 children. I have 3 brothers, 3 sisters. My mom is an alcoholic, and my dad is a workaholic politician. And I always joke, the alcoholic mom, the workaholic politician, they created me, Alcoholics Anonymous. It kind of goes together, right? I was destined to be here. But at a young age, my mom is bipolar schizophrenic. She's manic depressive. So when she'd take her psychotropic medication, when she'd take it, she would drink whiskey with it, so the medicine wouldn't work right. So things kind of got crazy at my house from time to time. There were fights, there were arguments. And whenever things got like that, my older siblings brought me to a lady who pretty much raised me. She was an old black lady. Her name was Masetta. And she was almost 100 years old when she passed away, and she couldn't have any children. And I guess racism was still prevalent back in the 80s because there were several people that dropped off their children that were mixed at her house and said they were going to come back and get them, and they never returned. She adopted these children. She raised me like I was her own. She whooped my ass like I was her own. And she instilled in me a lot of morals, a lot of beliefs, a lot of values, and that lady saved me a lot of heartache, and I'm thankful for her. She brought me to a gospel church. I was the only white kid in the gospel church, clapping and singing and stuff. And a lot of people come in Alcoholics Anonymous and they're like, I was a square peg in a round hole. But I really was a square peg in a round hole, you know what I'm saying? But I enjoyed it. I fed off of it. I like being unique. I like standing out. I like people asking me questions, being interested in me and all that. It gave me a way to, selfish and self-centered, stand out in the crowd. I also found escape by playing sports, baseball, basketball, and football. Whenever I was 12 years old, whenever I had my first drink. I had sips of alcohol, and my dad would crawfish balls and crab balls and stuff. I'd go grab, the beer. I'd take a sip. I'd bring it to him. But the first time it worked. I was 12 years old. I was hanging out with my friends. I was drinking Blue Beast and Mad Dog 2020, the combination of two. Gin and juice. Drinking some gin and juice. And I drank both of them. I blacked out. I woke up the next day, and I was like, who spilled rice and gravy on the ground? And they were like, no, you threw up. I was like, awesome. Awesome. I don't remember anything that had happened that night. Like I said, I blacked out. But something that sticks out in my mind, whenever I drank that alcohol and that warm sensation came over me, you try to describe this to a non-alcoholic, a hard drinker, and they don't get it. Once I drank that alcohol, and that was the feeling that I got. The sense of ease and comfort came over me. And the book talks about a complete psychic change as the essence of a spiritual experience. And whenever I drank alcohol and I put that stuff in my body, I had a complete psychic change like that. I was comfortable in my own skin. I can talk to girls. I can dance. I can laugh. I wasn't a short, buck-toothed kid with freckles anymore. I felt comfortable in my own skin, and all that chaos going on around me, it just went away, and I was okay. And that's what it did for me. And I didn't make it a point to drink every single day as a result of that. I became a hard drinker, as the book describes. And this is my story. Sedatives are a part of my story. I like to reach oblivion as quick as possible, and whatever allowed me to do that, I did it. But I really like to mix pills and whiskey. I like to black out. I like to lose control, and so sedatives are a part of my story. I hope I don't offend anybody, but Bill W. writes about it in his book. So. So I became a weekend drinker, and I also got in a relationship with this girl whenever I was 12. We stayed together for 7 years, and she wasn't one of us. She was a Norman. She was a really good girl. I took hostages, unfortunately. But whenever I became 16 years old and I got my license, I had no consequences until then, right? Once I got mobile, I started to have some problems, and I like to drink and drive, and I'm not proud of that, and I'm very fortunate I didn't kill anybody while I was drinking and driving. But whenever I was 16 years old, I was driving to school, and I was under the influence, and I ran over a girl, and I hurt her really, really badly. And as selfish and self-centered as I was yelling at her, "Look what you did to my vehicle," instead of how are you? I was yelling at her because she stepped out in front of my vehicle, I said. I'm very fortunate that I didn't hurt anybody while I was under the influence drinking and driving. But I went to a house party. Well, the last thing I remember, it was a Friday night, and I was with some friends, and I remember sitting on this little drawbridge. It was over this little pond, and the last thought I had was I sat down, and the lights went out on me. And I ended up waking up the next mid-morning, and I had blood all over my clothes, and I was in a room full of people I really didn't recognize. And I'm like, "What happened last night? I don't remember what happened." And the girl that was laying next to me, she was like, "Do you don't remember what happened last night?" I said, "No." And she went on to tell me this story of how I humiliated myself. I went to this house party and all this stuff happened, and I was like, "Man, I'm never doing that again. I swear I'm never doing that again. I'm never letting it get that bad again. I can't believe it happened like this time, And I got in my vehicle, and, the book talks about we can't bring into consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation even a week or a month ago. I get locked up in jail, and fear would sober me for a little bit, and I'd read the Bible, and I'm going to get out of here, and I'm a changed man. I'm never coming back to this place again. Or I'd wake up out of the blackouts or the sprees, and I'd say, "Man, I'm never doing it that bad again," or "I'm never mixing those two, and I'm going to be okay next time." And once the thought comes into mind that I'm going to take a drink, I can't bring it with sufficient force, all the humiliation, the suffering, the pain of a week, a month. I woke up out of that blackout swearing it off that I'm never doing it again, and an hour later I'm saying it's going to be different this time. And I got in my vehicle and I drove away, and I went to my brother's house, which is about 15 miles away from where I was. And I had been in and out of consciousness for about 4 days because I was on a binge. And I got to my brother's house. He hands me a handful of sedatives. He says, "Take these, but you can't stay here." So I took them, and I drove off down the road. And, yeah, fail, right? It seemed normal, though. It did. And I get about 2 miles down the road, and there's like a 20-foot canal in front of me. And it's like turn left or turn right. And I'm like, okay, turn left. But my mind and my hand wasn't really working together, and I went straight. And I totaled my car into this canal. And I climbed out of the sunroof, and I climbed out of the canal, and I get down the side of the road, and like my eyes are the size of golf balls. I'm kind of wigging out at this point. And I flag down this vehicle, and it's a truck, and these people get out. It's two guys, and they're like, "Hey, are you all right? What happened?" I told them, and they said, "Hold on." And they reached inside their truck, and they grabbed some walkie-talkies, and they're like, "Beep, beep," and they called the cops right in. They were off-duty firefighters. So the cops were there within like 2 minutes, and they were like, "Did you have anything to drink tonight?" "No, sir." It was very obvious that I had something to drink. And I got my first offense DUI. I was 16 years old, and I got sent to treatment. And in Opelousas, Louisiana, right? It's in the middle of Cajun country by Lafayette. It was an adolescent treatment center, and treatment did what it was designed to do. It introduced me to you. It introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what it was designed to do, and that's what it did. My first meeting was the Liberty Street group of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was an impromptu speaker meeting in this old crack house, and it was like textbook AA. I'd watch in movies and stuff, and you'd walk up to the podium, you'd share a little bit of your experience, strength, and hope. You'd sit down, somebody else would come up. It was kind of like that. And this guy was talking about urinating on himself and sleeping under bridges, and I'm like, I'm in here, I smoke a little pot and I drink, check. Not that bad. And they suggested I do like 90 days. I did 30 days, and I got out of there. And I didn't even make it through there sober. I didn't have a desire to get sober, so I was eating the melatonin and thinking I was going to get high on that or something. I don't know. But saving up my roommate's melatonin. Doesn't work, by the way. So I got out of there, and I got sent to this intensive outpatient program. And on Tuesdays at 2:30, I was able to hang out with my friends and take a drug test, take a breathalyzer test, and I was able to not do anything from Tuesday night until Friday. I'd hang out with my friends on Friday, and I'd drink my Crown, and I'd drink some Heineken and stuff like that. And I was able to stop and moderate until Tuesday at 2:30, and I'd repeat the cycle over and over again. And I never failed a drug test or breathalyzer test. I finished the program in like 3 months. It was a 6-month program. I always say I was waiting for them to ask me to start sponsoring people because I was such a good client. And I also ended up going to another high school because of the humility that had just happened at that other school. I was like, if I just leave that school and change schools, everything's going to be okay now, right? You ever did that? Right? But the problem is I went to this new high school, and my little cousin and like 3 other friends had just got out of juvenile detention centers and rehabs, and they were like, well, we're going to change our lives too, and we're going to go to this school with you. And it was the same thing from the other school, but we just got away with murder. I was like the Zach Morris of Terrebonne Parish. And I always, it's an inside joke, you have to be there, I guess. But at this high school, you can get away with murder. And like, if I wouldn't have went to the school, I wouldn't have graduated. There's no doubt in my mind. It was just like, whatever. And the next, my 11th and my 12th grade year of high school was just really foggy and blurry, and I was beginning to drink and use other substances every day and missing school and all this stuff. And I ended up graduating, and I cheated my way through high school. That's how I graduated. I had such a fear that if I applied myself and I failed, well, it was on me. You know, but if I didn't try and I cheated, well, if it didn't work out, well, I didn't try, you know. So it's all good. But I got out of it, and instead of me leaving to go to Cancun, Mexico like I was supposed to, the judge was like, you're not going to leave the state of Louisiana, and you're going to go back to rehab for your senior trip. So I ended up going to rehab. I did 21 days of detox, and on the way to treatment, I needed a little relief, you know, to take the edge off. And I ended up sneaking in some sedatives into this treatment center. It was a 30-day treatment center. I remember, I took the drug test and the breathalyzer test, and I took the sedatives, and it was like 200 people in this treatment. It was like co-ed. And this guy was talking about his relationship. I was like, you need to get out of that relationship. It's detrimental to your sobriety. You're going to get drunk over it. And I was wasted, you know. They kicked me out the day before my graduation for talking to some girl. And I got the boot. Really, it was the best thing they could have done because I was taking up a bed for somebody that actually wanted to get sober. So I understand it now. That wasn't the reason why they kicked me out. The reason why is because they knew I didn't want to get sober and I was full of crap. So that's the truth. I got sent back to that outpatient program. They wanted to send me to a halfway house, and I made a deal with them. Well, they made a deal with me. They said that Tuesdays, 2:30, same date, same time, same everything as before. And if you don't fail any drug tests or breathalyzer tests, you're good to go. We'll write a letter to your judge, your probation officer, you're off of papers, everything's good. But if you fail one, we're sending you to Lake Charles, Louisiana, to this halfway house. Okay, deal. The problem is I'd hang out with my friends like I did before, and once I started drinking, I might go to sleep, but I woke up the next morning and I was still thirsty, and I didn't have any say-so on if I was going to drink or if I wasn't going to drink. I didn't want to, with an overpowering desire not to do it, but I did it anyways. Like, I had lost all willingness, all willpower to do it on my own. And I failed every drug test and every breathalyzer test that they gave me, and I showed up several times intoxicated to that group. I couldn't. I couldn't imagine my life with it, and I had no choice. I got sent to this halfway house, and I got there, and I was there for about a month, and I was getting drunk while I was there, but hiding it because I worked this job at night, and I ended up leaving there and moving in with my sponsor. I got a sponsor for the first time, and this guy and his wife had 3 children. They lived in a 3-bedroom trailer, and they were both sober, him and his wife, and they invited me into their home. They didn't even have room for me, and they brought me into their home. And I was getting drunk over there, and I was hiding it. But every night before they go to bed, they'd hold hands as a family, and they'd say the Lord's Prayer, and they'd say, "Keep coming back. It works if you work it. If you don't, you don't," and all that stuff, But they included me into their family, and I left. They didn't ask me to leave. I left because I was had so much guilt, shame, and remorse that I was doing that under their roof. That I left and I moved into this Motel 6 off of Enterprise Drive. And I ran out of money and I ran out of alcohol and I ran out of all the other stuff. And I was left with myself, and I picked up the phone and I called their house, and his wife picked up the phone, and I couldn't say a word. I was crying. And she said, "Jacob, is that you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, Did you relapse?" "No." I couldn't be honest with her. I couldn't be honest with myself, much less be honest with her. And I said no. And I hung up the phone. I called my dad, and he brought me back to Houma. And immediately whenever I got back over there, I picked up right where I left off. with my little cousin and several of those other friends, and they had graduated high school by this point. And 2 days before Christmas in 2005, my life changed. I went to a house party and dropped off some sedatives, and I had a date to go on, and I went on the date, and my phone starts ringing, and it starts ringing, and it starts ringing, and it starts ringing. And I picked it up, and it was my best friend Corey, and I'm like, well, what do you need? And he says, man, Nick's dead. He died, and your aunt's over here, and the cops are over here, and all this stuff, and, he's dead. And somebody I went to that house, and after I dropped off the sedatives, somebody else dropped off some other sedatives, and the combination of the two, he went to sleep, and he didn't wake up. He was 19 years old, and his mom was devastated. And I remember vaguely, like at the funeral and at the wake, because I don't remember much for the next 4 months. I got sober soon after. His mom and dad was at the wake saying, Jacob, we want to talk to you. Jacob, we want to talk to you. And in my mind, they didn't want to talk to me. They wanted to blame me for everything that had happened. And that was the most selfish and self-centered thing that I could have ever done, was take full responsibility for somebody else's life. The most hopeless feeling in the world is when you check out of like the Motel 6 or, the Alamo Bowl or the, Plaza Bowl or whatever. It's always a bowl for some reason. I don't know why. But you check out of those hotels and you've got your garbage bags or your belongings and you're sitting there on the curb and you're like, what's my next move going to be? Like, who am I going to call? Who didn't I screw over today that's going to give me a place to crash or a ride here? You're making cash money, fly-by-night jobs just to support your habit. And that's what I had become. I said I wasn't homeless because I wasn't living under a bridge in like New Orleans East, but I was homeless. I had no place to call home. And I was staying with my friend Corey and on their couch with his mom and them, actually. And they had, in March, they were going on a trip to this place called Grand Isle, which is about 30 minutes away from where I grew up. It's like the beach and stuff. It's not really, yeah. Right? Yeah, it's a beach, I guess. It's not exotic, put it that way. But we had went on a trip for the weekend, and Sunday came and went, and they all had families and jobs and responsibilities and all these things to take care of, and I didn't have any of that stuff. So they went back, and I stayed in my truck for 5 or 6 days, and I reached oblivion, and I ran out of money, I ran out of alcohol, I ran out of all that stuff, and I was left with myself. And if you were doing the things that I was doing in those sprees, you didn't want to remember any of that stuff, and I didn't like to be sober. And I called my dad. I was 20 years old, and as intoxicated as I was, I'll never forget what he said. Jacob, as long as you do the right thing, son, you'll always have a roof over your head. Y'all ever heard that? Just stay straight, son, and do the right thing. You'll always have a place to come. Okay. And I went home, and I threw my garbage bags into the house, and I said, I'm going to an AA meeting in Lockport, which is 30 minutes away. Now, you might be an alcoholic if you have to lie about going to AA to go get loaded. And that's what I did. I know I'm not the only one. Come on. And that's what I did, And he called me about an hour later. He's like, well, where you at? And I was like, acceptance was the topic. We're drinking coffee. We're going to Shoney's. And he's like, you're lying to me. He didn't say it like that. He was like, you're lying to me. And he went and checked up on me. He walked into an all-women's big book study. It's very ironic that it happened, seriously. My aunt was there. I got like half my family in AA, and she had been sober for 5 years. And he's like, your aunt wants to talk to you. Okay. Y'all got any more water? I need some water. Anybody, please? She wants to talk to you. You see, from the time I was like 14, I was getting ink blot tests done and stuff like that. Thank you very much. I was getting ink blot tests done on me. Why is Jacob disturbed? Why, Jacob, you're an alcoholic. Jacob, you're a drug addict. Jacob, you're this. Jacob, you're that. And all these things, people telling me what they thought I was, but I couldn't concede to my innermost self what I had become. Nobody ever asked me, Jacob, do you think you're this? They said, Jacob, this is what you are. And my aunt sat me down that night, and I was loaded, and she's like, she started asking me questions off of page 20. And she didn't ask them, she didn't open up the book, but she started asking them, were you a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Jacob? Well, yeah, once I put it in my body, all bets are off. I'm unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. I might be sleeping in bed at 10 o'clock, or I might be breaking your car at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what's going to happen, Where you sell the mildly intoxicated. No, I never just drank one. I never just did one of anything. It was always, and I'm going for extremes. Did you appear in hospitals and sanitariums? Several hospitals, 3 inpatients, 2 halfway houses, between 15 and 20 outpatient programs, of course, yeah. And she's asked me question after question. I'm like, this is it. I'm sharing my experience with her. But not only that, but she's sharing her experience with me, and she got me. Y'all are sneaky. Y'all are. And she got me. She grasped my attention with depth and weight. She said that she Al-Anon stepped my dad because my dad was like, you're not coming home, you need to go to treatment. And I said, well, I've been through every treatment center in the state of Louisiana, nothing's going to help me. And she said, well, why don't you call your cousin in Baton Rouge? He has a place, and maybe he can help you. And I made the phone call, and he said, are you willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober, Jacob? And out loud, I'm like, yeah, I want to stay sober. But in the back of my mind, I was like, if I can just do 30 days, I can get the heat off me for a little bit, then I'll be okay. I just need to get the heat off. But yeah, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. So I ended up getting as messed up as possible that night. I came to in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a hospital bed off of Government Street. I don't even know what my sobriety date is. I say April the 2nd because my brother's birthday is April the 1st, and I knew it was after the Final Four because LSU had lost that year. So I just say April the 2nd. It's not really that big of a deal, right? But I was in a hospital bed, and I was in this treatment center, and I was going around for several weeks saying how good I was doing. I had 6 months of sobriety at one point, and how I knew how to stay sober and all this, because I wanted to look like a really good client so I can get out of there, And I had this thing called Family Day, and there's a popular TV show that comes on that's pretty similar to that, but I was sober, and it was interesting. And my dad was the only person that showed up, and my dad sat needed me. He looked me square in the eyes, and he's crying his eyes out, and he said, I've accepted the fact that you're going to die. You're probably loaded already because you've done this over and over and over again, and I don't believe that there's any hope for you. And I finally accepted these things because you've done this so many times. I didn't become willing to do whatever it took to stay sober anymore. I was willing to do whatever it took to not hurt him anymore. And that was enough for me to kind of make my beginning in this deal. And I did 10 months of treatment, halfway houses, sober living houses, and all this stuff. I got a sponsor who was an atheist. We never got on our knees and did a 3rd-step prayer. I wrote out a 4-step, but there were certain things I left off because I was very unique and nobody had ever experienced those things. So, of course, nobody can ever hear that, right? Even though I might have wrote it down when we did the 5th step, I kind of skipped over it because it wasn't that important. And I never made restitution to people I had harmed, and I didn't help others. And I got out of that facility, and I was doing all the same behaviors without picking up the drink, and I was really, really dry, and I thought about drinking every day for 10 months. I just said, if I don't drink, everything's going to be okay, right? It's just not about drinking. Everything's going to be okay if I just don't drink. And just not drinking is not sufficient if you're a real alcoholic like I am. Because I was laying in my bed, and I couldn't turn the static off in my head, when maybe you can drink just one. No, you know what's going to happen if you drink just one. Well, maybe you can smoke a joint because, it wouldn't really have a problem with weed, And, well, maybe, no, it was like all this crap going on in my head, and I couldn't turn the noise off. And the next thought was, maybe you should kill yourself. And this was being sober, dry, no alcohol in my system at all. And alcohol was still the great persuader. It beat me into a state of reasonableness. You see, I was an agnostic. I didn't have enough proof that there was God. I was more angry at God than anything. And I got down on my knees that night, and I cried out to whatever was up there, please help me. I can't do this anymore, crying. Because I couldn't imagine my life with alcohol or without alcohol. The next day, I made it through that, and I got in my truck, and I went to a beginner's meeting in Denham Springs, Louisiana. There was a guy there named Thad, and Thad was from Chattanooga, and he rode a Harley. He was sleeved off with tattoos, and he sponsored my roommate. But I walked up to that guy, and I said, man, I'm going to die if you don't help me. I can quote the book and all this stuff, but I don't know the book. I don't know how to stay sober, and if I'm sober, I don't know how to be happy, and I need help. And he said, I'm as willing as you are. And within 2 months, we were through the 12 steps out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And immediately, I started to get some relief. He called me. He outlined this 4-step deal, right? Because it says in the 3rd step, it's better to meet God alone than to understand. The wording, of course, is quite optional, so long as we express the idea of that prayer, voicing it without reservation. And, when you say that prayer, I say that prayer every morning. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou will. Relieve me of the bondage of self so I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness to those that I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we're ready because they trick you, right? I get down on my knees every morning and I say that prayer because the wording is quite optional. Whenever I say that prayer, I believe it says, help me. Help me. I need all the help that I can get. I got down on my knees off of Government Street that night alone in that room. Help me. Whatever you are, please help me. I met God alone that night. And maybe I didn't experience it or feel it, but I did meet God alone because I made the decision. And I went and found a sponsor the next day and asked him to help me. I asked for the help. I made the decision to do it and go through the process. He outlined the 4-step, resentment, fears, and sex. And he said, you got a week to do it. And he called me on the Friday because we were supposed to do it on the Monday. And he said, well, how's that 4-step going? I said, it's going good, He's like, well, where are you at? And I said, well, I haven't really started it. He's like, okay. Red line makes you thirsty. He said, we'll come over to the house anyways. I'm going to put some coffee on, and we're gonna talk. So I went over to his house, and he sits me down at the table. He puts the big book in front of me. He's got a notepad, and he says, okay, resentments, fear, sex. Start right, and you've got 4 hours. I'm going to be over here playing Halo, and in 4 hours, we're going to do your 5th step. And I was like, okay. And I did it, and I was able in 4 hours to put the most glaring, apparent, obvious things down that had been blocking me for so long. And we did the 5th step. And he gave me a list of the character defects that was blocking me off. And he said, now go home and sit quietly for an hour. Reflect on the things you've done. Did you omit anything? You ask yourself the questions. And ask God to help you remove these character defects. And I said, okay. And I went home and I sat quietly. And some of those character defects were removed like right away. But some of them I really enjoy and I wanted to hold on to. You know what I'm talking about? And I got down on my knees after that and I said that 7-step prayer. And the wording, of course, is quite optional in that as well. But every night before I end my day, I always say that prayer, my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. It doesn't say amen at the end of step 3. I wonder why. I don't know. I have an opinion about it. I believe that I need all the help that I can get from step 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 so I don't run from this deal, and then I can say thank you. Amen. I get a list of all the people I had harmed because I look at my inventory. If somebody harmed me, I usually retaliated. You stepped on my toes, I stepped on your foot. And of course, there's some innocent bystanders that I put on the list as well. I'm from Louisiana. You can drink alcohol 24/7 there, so there was a lot of innocent bystanders. And, yeah. Woo. I believe that I start having spiritual experiences in 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I have an awakening in step 9. This is where I find God. I find God. If I'm an agnostic, I find God in step 9. I'm going to share some of my experiences with you all. I was laying quietly one night and I was going over my day, and the thought came to mind that whenever I was drinking, the type of alcoholic that I was going to Mardi Gras, and I didn't have enough money to go to Mardi Gras, so I walked into a convenience store and I asked the lady for something behind the counter, and when she turned her back, I stole a donation thing for like the muscular dystrophy or cerebral palsy. I don't know what it is, and I'm pretty ashamed of it, but I did it. I stole it, and I went and partied. I went to any length to get alcohol, any length. It didn't matter. And that's what I did. And it came back to mind. I wrote it down on paper, and I called my sponsor, and I was like, look, this is what happened. What do I need to do? And he's like, well, what do you think you need to do? And I said, well, it's an anonymous program, so I think I need to make an anonymous donation to the gas station. He said, but you're not admitting any wrong by doing that. You harm those people too, so you didn't harm that can. He says, let me know how that works out for you. Then I called him the next day, and I said, look, I've got an idea. I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to put the money in the letter. I'm going to admit the wrong, but I'm not going to put my name and my address on it because it's an anonymous donation. He says, well, you're not. How would you know that the amends was made? Let me know how it works out for you. And see, I had so much fear going through with this amends because I'm admitting guilt to a criminal offense. I can't believe I did it to begin with. I'm going to be in the newspaper and on social media, like and all this stuff, right? And they're going to come back and arrest me. It says that we have decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience. So we ask that we be given the strength and the direction to do the right thing no matter what the consequences might be. And by this time, the thought of drink had left me. And it wasn't about drinking anymore. It was about having a spiritual experience. And I wrote the letter. I put my name and my address. I always described the thought whenever I was going to mail that. I came out of that. You ever watch cartoons and Bugs Bunny comes out the rabbit hole? And there's a light bulb that goes off over his head. That's an intuitive thought. That's what happened. It was like light bulb. I need to make sure this amends was made. Doesn't matter what happens, what were consequences. I got to make sure. And I mailed it off, and I got a letter back a week later. I called my sponsor. I was like, I got this letter back. I don't know what to do. He's like, why don't you read the letter? This is how I form a relationship with a God of my own understanding. It says, Jacob, thank you for your honesty. I admire what you did. The money you donated will be used to assist the hundreds of local families that we serve. Again, thank you for your honesty and your willingness to correct your wrongdoings. God bless you. And then she signed it. Like I often think back, what if I wouldn't have put my name and my address on that letter and I wouldn't have got this back? I wouldn't be the same person I am today. Might not even be sober. I don't know. This changed my life. It changed my life. And that's just one thing, you know. The spiritual experience that I had last week is not sufficient to keep me sober today. It's not. I have to continue to have them on a daily basis. That aunt whose son passed away, my little cousin's mom, I got a call from my brother. I was 2 years sober. He says, your aunt wants to talk to you. She knows you're sober and she wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I picked up the phone and I finally called her. I had avoided her for 2 years because I still had that stuff going on. And as soon as I heard her voice, I started crying and broke down. I've never cried like that in my life. And I made the amends. I said, look, this is the part that I played. And there's, you have every right to know what happened that night. And the part that I played and everything that happened, he's your son. I can never give you your son back, but this is what happened. And I was wrong. And what can I do to make it right? And she said, Jacob, I love you unconditionally no matter what. And if my son had to die, at least he didn't die in vain if it helped to save just one person's life. And that life is yours. You know, and the things that we wanted to talk to you about, we didn't want to blame you. We wanted to let you know that the same things were going to happen to you that happened to Nicholas. 2 years ago, the day before Mother's Day, I get a phone call from my mom, and I wasn't even going to go see my mom for Mother's Day. And she calls me and she tells me my aunt has cancer. She was 50 years old. And she had... It had started in her colon and it went over her whole body, and she was at the house, and I drove down there to see her for Mother's Day, and I held her hand, and I thanked her from the bottom of my heart because she forgave me. God used her as an instrument to forgive me, so I can have that experience, you know. And she started to fight off the cancer, and it started to go into remission, and then she was continuing to do chemo, and it came back. And she couldn't do any more chemo because she was going to bleed out. And I get a phone call after a men's big book study at my apartment on a Tuesday night. It was about a week before Christmas. And she wasn't going to make it through the night. So I drove down to Houma. I walked into the house that my grandpa built 2 blocks away from where I grew up. And she was laying in a bed, and her 2 daughters were standing next to her with some friends and some family, some extended family. And I got on my knees and I held her hand and I kissed her hand and I laid there for 8 hours. And we waited for my nanny to come in from Missouri. And when she got there, they asked all the friends and family to leave the room and just for immediate family to stay there. And they asked me to stay. And I was there in the last few moments of her life. And I drove back to Baton Rouge in complete silence. You know, there's some amends we think we can never make, you know, we can never make right. And I never thought I could make amends to my little cousin for what had happened. And I was there in a day. You know, I made the amends. I made it right with them finally. And they asked me to speak at her funeral and do the eulogy. And that was such an honor, you know, to be able to share somebody's life like that. She was buried 7 years to the day that her son had passed away. 7 years to the day. You know, there's no coincidences, no flimsy reeds anymore, you know. It all happens for a reason. I truly believe that. This has probably been the hardest year of my life. And I'm not just talking about sobriety, I'm talking about life. A week after I made 7 years last year on April the 2nd, I found out I was going to be a father a week later, and I ended up moving to New Orleans with this girl, and she's a great girl. We grew up together, and she wasn't one of us. And we go through the motions, and we finally come into acceptance and agreement that we're going to have a child and all this, and we picked out baby names, and we're in the doctor's office joking about a baby reveal party, and we found out the baby didn't have a heartbeat anymore. It was like right at around 4 months. And you know, when that happened, like the first thought is like to run. You know, I get thirsty over things like that, and it wasn't. It was, you know, what can I do to be of service to this girl? You know, what can I do to help her? And there's some people in the AA program that are in this room right now that reached out to her, you know, and shared their experience with some of the things that they had gone through in sobriety, and you know, gave us some options on what to do to get over what had happened. And the relationship didn't work out, and it ended. And it's hard to worship God and play God at the same time, you know what I'm saying? And even in our best moments, we're a producer of confusion rather than harmony. And that's what had happened. And I was trying to manage my life as best as I could and hold it all together with everything that was going on. And whenever the end happened, I just blew up bigger than what it would have blew up anyways, you know. And I'm going back through the 12 steps right now with a new guy because the experience, I love my sponsor, but the experience, he's given me everything he can, you know. And I needed a new experience with everything that happened. And we did a thorough inventory, and we did a 5th step and a 6th step and a 7th step, and I'm on my amends, and I reached out to her, you know, and she's not willing to talk to me. And I don't blame her for some of the things that had happened. You know, I want her to speak or talk about that. You know, I reached out to her, she didn't respond, and then she responded, and she said some hateful things. I reached out, she ends up reaching out to me and said some more hateful things. But the key is willingness, you know what I'm saying? I feel sorry for somebody like that because I know that if resentment blocks me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, and it's not just for the alcoholic, it's for anybody, you know. Resentment blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit, and I'm never going to find true happiness or peace whenever I'm holding on to something or a grudge because it blocks me off from you. If it blocks me off from you, I can't have a relationship with God because I find God in you. Like my sponsor says, on our first approach, we don't talk about the spiritual future freely. He says maybe you'll have another opportunity or another crack at this one day, but right now it's just not good enough. And thus we grow, though, right? The reason why I tell these stories is because, you know, those character defects that I was talking about in step 6, the ones that I really enjoy and the ones that I really like to hold on to, well, the ones that I really want to hold on to, it's whenever I get told, you know, go screw yourself, or, you know, they tell me the truth about myself sometimes, and I was just a very sick person. It's easy to forgive somebody once you get forgiven because we understand that we're sick people. You know, nobody's exempt from the human experience. And those character defects that I enjoy or I love so much become a little bit easier to let go of whenever those things happen because I don't want to feel that way anymore. You know, 10, 11, and 12, the maintenance steps, whenever, you know, go throughout the day. I pause when I'm agitated or doubtful. I talk to my sponsor. I talk to somebody that's very close to me immediately, and I write down inventories throughout the day. I'm not the best at doing 11 and 11, and I joke about that all the time. My sponsor's like, why don't you do 10 and 11 a little bit better, and you don't have to do it all the time. And I'm like, okay. So I'm trying to do better in that aspect of my life. Every morning on the way to work, I sit quietly for about 20 minutes on the drive in. Every night before I end my day, I sit quietly for about 20 or 30 minutes, and I write a journal. It's a guided meditation. Whatever's on my mind, I write it down. If I start off several days in a row by putting I'm fearful of, maybe I need to take some actions to correct some things that are going on in my life. God speaks through me through that, and I share it with my sponsor. I share it with somebody that's close to me about what's going on. It kind of holds me accountable in black and white. Having had a spiritual awakening in step 12, as a result of these steps, we carry this message to alcoholics, and we practice these principles in all of our affairs. And I talked about that in the workshop earlier. As a result of working these 12 steps, I've had a spiritual awakening, but yet I have to continue to pass on to continue to have the spiritual awakening. And it goes hand in hand with step 2 for me, because I didn't know how to find God. I didn't know what God was whenever I got here. And I was more angry at God than anything. It says, I want to read some. And we agnostics. It says, we found that God does not make too hard of terms with those who seek Him. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, and never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. Whenever I got those hands laid on me and the power of God compels it out of you, and I was drinking in the parking lot, I got silent retreats, regular retreats, sweat lodges, non-denominational gospel Baptists, like everything to try to get me sober, get me relief over alcoholism. And it wasn't working, and I blame God for all the bad things that happened in my life. When my mom and dad divorced and didn't get back together, that was God's fault. When my little cousin passed away, God did that to me. Whenever that girl I loved so much didn't come back, and I begged Him to put her back in my life, God did that. I blame God for all the bad, but yet what happened whenever all the good things happened in my life? I took credit for it. I blame God for all the bad. I took credit for all the good. God does not make too hard of terms. I made the hard terms. God was always there. I just chose not to see it because I was too busy playing it myself. It says, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by pomp, by calamity, by the worship of other things, but in some form or another He's there. In the last analysis, it may be found. The last place that I wanted to look, Lake Charles, Morgan City, I'm going to join the Navy. Everywhere that I went, the common denominator was me. Everywhere as I went, I was always there until the last place that I wanted to look was right there within myself. So if God lies right there within me, God lies right there within you. I have to get out of myself and help you in order to find the presence of something greater than me. I get the opportunity to go into a treatment center in Baton Rouge. I'm active in corrections work as well. It's funny because I heard people talk about, corrections work before. I've never thought about going to a facility and finding freedom. And it's true. I went in Angola last week, and I was talking to a guy that's doing life for killing somebody over a cell phone and $100. Freer than most people I know in the outside world. We're getting meetings started up in there. In these treatment centers and all these facilities, like I said that earlier, you could stick me in these places. You couldn't make me be willing. We're the only ones that can exalt ourselves to do anything about it. We have to make the decision. We have to be the ones to push ourselves. We can't do it, but yet we have to have messengers to go in there. The 12th step has changed. People are getting sent to these institutions, these places, and they're not ready yet. But maybe we can raise the bottom. If you want sponsees, go to those treatment centers. Go to those prisons. Go to those jails. Go to those outpatient programs. Get involved in H&I. That's where they're at. And they need you. They do. I'm going to close with this. I always do. It says spiritual experiences is in the back of the book. It says the term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone's conclusion. You know, the first 100 men and women had the white light experience. The lady that raised me would catch the Holy Ghost. It's erroneous. It doesn't happen that way for everybody. I grew into it more slowly. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes going completely against what we used to be. Ideas, emotions, attitudes which used to drive us are cast to the side and replaced for new motives and conceptions which dominate us, take us over. So those revolutionary changes are described. Though it's not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Every human being that's born in this world has a conscience. We know the difference between right and wrong. My dad said, Jacob, go take $1 off my nightstand, get you a Coke and a candy bar across the street at the gas station. I went into his room. Don't take the 20, don't take the 20, don't take the 20. I took the 20. My conscience was saying, don't do it, but I did it anyways, right? When we align our will with God's will is when we begin to use it rightly, is what the 12 and 12 talks about. That's not aligning my will with God's will. I used to struggle with doing the right thing before I got sober. I've struggled with doing the wrong thing today. Because right here, I trust my conscience. I trust it. Once we've practiced this for a while, it becomes automatic. Automatic. Among our rapidly growing membership of millions of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety because it develops slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. And here it is. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. We change. Life doesn't change. Our reaction to what life is changes. The way we perceive life changes. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Being aware of the presence of God is the most important thing in my life today, and I don't even know what God is. My conception of God changes on a daily basis because I change. I feel it, God. It's like trying to explain the sin of a rose to somebody. You can't. You have to experience the sin of a rose. It's the same thing with God. You can't explain what God is because it's not possible. You experience God. And that's how it works. Most emphatically, I love that word, emphatically means a matter of factly. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. There is a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof against all argument, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt, power, and investigation. Don't knock it before you try it. And I said this earlier as well, and every time I read it, I always say the same thing. If you're tired of the way your life's going, you get a sponsor, you work these 12 steps precisely how it's outlined in this book, you're honest with yourself, and as a result of being honest with yourself, you're able to be honest with somebody else. I dare you not to change. It's going to happen in spite of yourself. It's going to happen. I promise you that. I promise you that. You work the 12 steps. You have the experience. You can call me a liar. Thank you all very much for allowing me. Love you all.